the poverty rate among Nigeria's rural population has reached an alarming 75.5%, and that's according to the World Bank. In its April Poverty and Equity Brief for Nigeria, the bank said rural dwellers are overwhelmingly bearing the brunt of economic stagnation, inflation, and structural challenges in the country. Well, 41.3% of the urban population live below the poverty line, but the figure for rural Nigeria is almost double. In other data, 30.9% of Nigerians survive on less than $2.15. That's almost 3,500 naira a day. Now, these figures highlight the deepening inequality and widespread economic hardship across the country, according to some economists.
Okay, let's bring in top economist to respond to these issues. Professor Kenife, always a delight to have you on
Thank
Newsnight.
you for having me.
I mean, 75% poverty rate among rural Nigerians. I mean, how bad is this, and what could really be the causative, factors that would lead to this huge level of poverty in the rural areas where nature really is. You can plant
is
food
incredible.
and what have you. Why?
Yeah. The thing is that in the rural area, we actually have a double tragedy there because insecurity is more pronounced in the rural area. And also, in fact, you have to put this across, there is a forecast that by 2030, currently we have a split of about 50-50 urban and rural in terms of population. But the urbanization rate is 4.6%. Population rate is just about 3%. So what it shows is that by 2030, the projection is that 75% of the population will be in urban area, while 25% will be in rural. So it's going to even get worse. Because what has happened is that that group that has been producing the food, the average age is over 65 years, and then the young people are fleeing to the urban areas, and we don't have that manpower. And even one of the reports from Africa Union in 2014 said that in the Malabo Declaration, said that 80% of the basic agricultural produce come from women. 80% of the locally processed food comes from women. And 80% of petty food, all this sold in rural markets, are by women. And when you now juxtapose that with insecurity, the spate of insecurity in the rural area, then you're going to ask far more searching questions about food insecurity in the country. And then, of course, when you also look at the GDP figures, you see that we're underperforming in agriculture. It's about 1.7%. When the population growth rate is twice that, about 3%, and the urbanization rate is even 4.5 or 4.6%. So it's not looking good at all. But on top of that also is unemployment and worklessness in the rural area. And you have a slightly different challenge. The impact of poverty in the urban area is more to do with inflation. The unemployment of young people in the urban area, and then the impact of high cost of transportation. But even if when you are producing the food, transporting it into the urban area hikes the price. So, it is not a very good picture, to be honest. And in fact, when you disaggregate the figures, you see even more stark revelations. For example, there's a gender dimension where the women are male is about 63.9% of the female that are feeling the heat compared to 63% of men. And then if you also look at things like demography, you find that 0 to 14-year-old, they even have 72.5% poverty in 0 to 14-year-old. So it is even worse demographically across whether it's rural or urban. Then also, if you look at things like education and poverty, if you take them together, you find that lack of formal education and lack of primary education, the numbers are just mind-boggling.
I know, but there are those who will say you don't even need the statistics to believe the World Bank. There are those who say even relatives from the villages, from the rural areas, are calling more frequently now to send help home. But I want to ask you, as an economist and development expert, has this always been the case historically? And if this is so, does it then suggest that the economic reforms that are being carried out are making the bottom half worse off? Or, let me put it this way, the economic reforms are not trickling down, they're even working at all at the top?
One thing that we need to recognize is that there are two ways, there are two roads in development. You have the high-speed area where you say entrepreneurship will create jobs and bring in investment and all of that. You have the other lane where there are people suffering abject poverty, where it's just about how do they get by today. So those are the people that palliatives are looking. But how many people would you be able to give palliatives, and how sustainable is palliative? You eat it for 1 week and you start hungry.
You'll be hungry again.
So it now depends on how much can we actually increase productivity across the board. So productivity is the answer, because the productivity is about giving people something to do, teaching them how to fish rather than giving them fish. So that is something. So that's why insecurity must be tackled decisively, because it's preventing people who have even planted from going to harvest. Those who have harvested, and then you're on top of this, you are laying over this the climate factors, where we have to suffer thousands of hectares flood, and then you have fire, and it's unbelievable the scale. But there's another thing though, the disparity, the spatial dimension, which is where the north have about 46.5% in the north compared to the south, which is about 13.5%. So it tells you where the heat is felt most. And I can see you've just dealt with a discussion here on critical focus on some part of northeast. So these are manpower that we are wasting.
So what should we be doing apart from increasing? And when you say increase productivity in practical terms in Nigeria, because it just seems as if we bandied words, in this country. But when you say productivity, how do we begin to improve productivity? Solutions?
Okay, let me give you one example.
Yeah.
In the program that I'm doing, which is concession on cassava bioethanol value chain, we have decided to do away with seasonal emphasis on seasonal farming now. We just go for cyclical farming. We are saying plant in bags, plant in anywhere you have water bodies, whether you have lakes, or where you have borehole, or where you have a river or ordinary well. Use bags, croquet bags, and then put the thing. The thing is that they give you twice more yield than what you plant on the ground, and then early harvest. You can harvest in 5-6 months rather than wait for 1 year.
We hear you can actually plant in water.
So you can now plant twice. So it is in cycles rather than in seasons. So in that way, and we are focusing on even going up north. So there's a lot of emphasis.
That's as far as
and then you can do it everywhere around your home. You don't have to go into the far bush. When you think about, for example, if you plant cassava in 1 hectare, and there is 1 hectare is 100 meter by 100 meter, that's 10,000 square meter. So if you plant 1 square meter, it means you will get 10,000. But if you put bags, you have 9 bags in 1 square meter, which means you have 9 times more bags with the and then
so the messaging should be, Prof, to the average Nigerian: begin to farm wherever you are.
Surround yourself.
Agriculture is concerned. But the other measures, this government is coming up with Nigeria First policy, where it's saying Nigerian goods and services will be prioritized, above imported. Goods and services. How do you think, this would play out in addressing this, poverty issues, whether it's in the rural area or in the urban area?
That is the critical aspect, that we have to fight what the colonists gave to us. We have a legacy of just produce for them, and then we'll send it out there to process in the global north and bring it for us. So that situation is just not going to work, because it never will ever develop. If you are simply producing raw materials and then the industries are starved of the raw materials, and you have high post-harvest losses, 30 to 70%. So that means your import dependency is exacerbated. So when we focus on backward integration and import substitution and then prioritizing local production, then investment can come on the processing side of things. You can actually see the raw material that we are going to process. And I remember one act that is being presented by Raw Material Research Council, which says insist on minimum of 30% value addition. Now that is very important because we are doing that in ECOWAS as part of our minimum rules of origin, that you must have 30% value addition before before you can say the processed goods locally. Right. So that is one way of ensuring that if investments are going to come, they want to be sure that if they invest their money to process your raw material, that they are not going to come here and they cannot find that raw material. Right. Because you are still exporting that raw material. Say, for example, cassava. Nigeria produces 20 to 25% of world cassava. We are number one. Largest. Over 64 million metric tons. But 40% of that cassava never make it into the food chain because of post-harvest losses. On theory, we consume 90% of that. So the factories that have been built to do starch and cassava can't actually find the raw material. And that's hoping that nobody's cats will come to your farm to destroy your cassava. Absolutely. Professor, I know my producer is going to scream off my head, but I have to ask you this last question. She's saying we need to go. I want you to quickly weigh in on this debate between the presidency and the president of the African Development Bank, Mr. Akinwumi Adesina, about GDP being the right measure or not right measure. Is Nigeria better off than we were in 1960? The GDP isn't even a good measure. It's not a robust measure of the standard of living, because you think about it. Look at how you dress. Look at the phones we use. Look at the latitudes are innumerable, and you didn't have that. The level of education, even the ease, access to education. So we are better off. You have mobile phones, you have e-learning, you have so many better. Well, Nigerians didn't have to worry about food. They didn't have to worry about food. And then the population then was about 40-something million. Here, 230 million. So we're not actually comparing like to like, and so it's not a very, very robust way of measuring the things. Look at the number of ICT lines we had from 20,000. Are you saying we're better off than we were? I think we are much better off. Okay. But it could be better. Yeah. All right. Definitely. Always be better. Definitely. Professor Kenife, thank you very much for joining us on News.